This week's surveillance report covers Apple's security features that actually stopped the FBI from accessing a journalist's iPhone, but not their Mac, and we'll talk about why. A global wave of age verification that's hitting Austria, Spain, and Greece. Chat Control 1.0 has a comeback after a 2-year extension from the commission amidst negotiations failed. It's a little bit messy, but we'll talk about it. And Microsoft is backing away from recall as AI fatigue continues to grow. Welcome to the Techlore Surveillance Report, your essential weekly tech news, delivering deep analysis on the latest threats to security, privacy, and digital freedom, and empowering you to reclaim control and defend your rights. Let's start with the juicy story here. So there was a journalist that the FBI wanted to investigate their devices as part of an ongoing investigation. And so the two devices that are a key part of this story is an iPhone and a MacBook Pro. Now, the iPhone is just a typical iPhone 13, and when they tried to get into it, they actually discovered that it had lockdown mode enabled. Now, if you don't know what lockdown mode is a feature branded towards very high security individuals who need the maximum amount of protection on their iPhones and actually all Apple devices. This is supported on the Apple Watch, it's supported on the iPhone, the iPad, and also the MacBook as well. Apple directly says it helps protect devices against extremely rare and highly sophisticated cyber attack. The idea behind lockdown mode is it removes attack surface on your device and removes specific features and usability benefits in the interest of helping lock down the device and kind of prevent some of those things from being exploited in a possible attack, which we do see used by various companies out there that are trying to hack into people's devices. I've done a lot of coverage for lockdown mode on the Techlore channel, including an entire guide of what it looks like to actually use lockdown mode. I think it has odd restrictions here and there, but overall is quite usable given the amount of security it gives you. So it's all about perspective. And I'll leave our video diving into that in the show notes as well. And actually, the FBI tried to crack into this device, probably using typical technologies that they use by default. And they said, quote, CART couldn't get anything from the iPhone because the iPhone was in lockdown mode. CART could not extract that device, the government filing said. The FBI did extract information from the SIM card with an auto-generated HTML report created by the tool utilized by CART, but the data contained in the HTML was limited to just the phone number. Now, CART actually stands for the Computer Analysis Response Team, which is a part of the FBI. And yeah, so it's quite simple. Lockdown mode prevented the FBI from breaking into a device. Now, I always want to preface this by saying these security tools aren't necessarily meant to protect criminals or people doing anything wrong, but they are there to help protect your own data and make sure that you have your own right to your own information. And that is overall what this is doing. There have been various stories now over the years of lockdown mode preventing some attacks on people's devices. And so it genuinely is a real feature that will give you guys real benefits if you are one of these higher at-risk groups. And so I highly recommend utilizing lockdown mode if you are somebody who's trying to maximize on security. And the coolest thing, I actually say this to pretty much everybody out there, I don't think everybody needs lockdown mode. I think it's quite overkill, but it's actually fairly easy to see if it's overkill for you because all you have to do to enable it is go into your settings, go into privacy and security, scroll all the way down, you'll see lockdown mode, just enable it. It's a soft reboot on your phone and then you'll just be using it. That's it. You're done. And then if you're like, oh shoot, like this feature is broken, I don't like this about it, you just go into the same exact menu I just shared with you and you turn it off and you'll do another soft reboot and you'll be back to normal. There is absolutely nothing permanent about this. There are no downsides to trying it and then just reverting back. So if you've never used lockdown mode and you have an Apple device, I challenge you to just turn it on and see if you like it and then turn it back off if you don't. It's actually a fun little experiment that I encourage people to do because I think it'll surprise you how usable your phone will still be, and you will be quite literally using one of the most secure devices you can possibly use on the market. Now, here's where things get a little bit juicier because there was an unlocked device and it was the reporter's laptop. Now, you might be going, man, the MacBook Pro isn't secure. Nope, they just had a way to unlock their Mac with a fingerprint. And so that's exactly what the FBI did. They said, hey, you're going to have to unlock your Mac with your fingerprint, and they did it, and sure enough, it unlocked, and now they have access to all that information, and because of that, they were able to get access to things like some Signal messages and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things here. First off, I think it's quite reassuring to see how effective things like lockdown mode are, and it's quite impressive how much security that Apple has chosen to give just regular people from just a simple settings toggle. It's quite impressive. I think it's also really reassuring that the signal messages are only read once a device was unlocked. I think it's also really reassuring that there was no like nefarious way they got into the Mac. And I think as far as takeaways, of course, utilize lockdown mode again if you have a higher security threat model, but also remember the limitations of biometrics. During an active investigation, you can be compelled to unlock a device with a biometric, including Face ID or Touch ID or anything else on Android or these other devices, because that doesn't fall under the same kind of protections that something like a password does from a legal perspective. So there's two approaches to this. You have the more extreme approach, which is just never using biometrics if you want the maximum amount of legal protection. But keep in mind, in public spaces, cameras might see you typing your password. So it's kind of a trade-off here and there. And then there's also more of a middle ground approach where you can still use biometrics, but now you have to be kind of ready to go to maybe, try to power off your phone, because even if you hold on your power button or you set the emergency mode on your phone, it actually turns off your biometric authentication on something like an iPhone. And same with your Mac. If you just power it down, then you'll now have to type in a password again. So there's a little more DIY. It's less robust, but those are a couple options to throw your guys' way. Now, that's not the only story here, because Apple also released a new security feature with the intent to limit cell networks from collecting precise location data. So if you haven't heard of this before, your cell company has a huge amount of insight into everywhere you go and everything you do. It's just the way that cell works in general. When you walk around, your phone has to ping all these different cell towers to make sure you're getting the best service. And a lot of these cell companies have found ways to not only profit off of that, but also share that with third parties. It's a pretty terrible practice that's going on behind the scenes. And so Apple is doing at least a minor thing against this, which with this new feature, which is literally called Limit Precise Location, not a creative name or anything like that. It will limit the precision of that location data that iPhones and cellular-enabled iPads share with the customer cell carrier. So sharing a less precise location like the general neighborhood rather than a street address will help protect the device owner's privacy. Now, what's really bizarre about this, if you actually read Apple's blog/support article about this, it covers kind of what it does. Again, this isn't like an absolute privacy tool. It's just a minor step in the right direction. But if you actually go into the what you need section, this is only supported on the iPhone Air, the iPhone 16e, or the iPad Pro M5. That's it. Those are the 3 devices that support this feature. You need to be on iOS 26.3 or later, and it's only supported on the following carriers: Telecom in Germany, EE and BT in the UK, Boost Mobile in the US, and then AIS and True in Thailand. That is it. If you don't have those exact requirements, you don't get this feature, which means probably almost nobody is actually getting this feature. So it's a bit unclear if this is going to expand over time, how much of this is tied to hardware. I know Apple has new cellular chips, but either way, this seems quite restrictive, and I am not sure who's actually going to get access to this. So maybe over time, it'll be a standard feature on all Apple devices, is my hope. All right, the next stories are all part of an age verification wave, which is hitting 3 countries in the same week. So the first country is going to be Austria. And this was shared to me from people in our Signal group. So thank you all for sharing that along. And this is originally written in German, I believe. And so this is a basic English translation from Brave. And so if I get anything wrong here due to the translation, blame the Brave people. Not necessarily me, please. So this is a pretty direct inspiration from other countries doing this. And so there's a draft law which is supposed to be announced by summer, which they said is there to better protect adolescents from harmful content on the platforms. Same stuff we hear from all these other countries about how they're trying to keep children safe by not dealing with any root issues and instead just gatekeeping these platforms away from children so that they still have to have parental consent to use a bad platform. And then when they turn 18, they can just use the same bad platform. I don't understand, but this is the direction the world is heading. Now, there is at least some decent conversation happening around this. They said that they want to demand more transparency in algorithms as platforms thus significantly influence what content users see. It's about responsibility and fairness. Platforms not only provide technical infrastructure, but also curate the content. For other information providers like television and radio, clear rules apply for good reason. These must also be enforced in a digital space. And actually, I don't disagree with this aspect of it, but I do disagree with the whole concept of age verifying the internet to ensure that this happens. I would argue that transparency in algorithms should just apply apply on a system-wide level to all users, and you don't need age verification in order to implement those restrictions. They also talk about media literacy and how that needs to be strengthened. And so there are some decent things here. I just don't understand personally where age verification specifically has to fit into this picture, especially with all the drawbacks that come with age verification, including the privacy concerns, including the right to access information concerns, and everything else that's been talked about on this channel time and time again. So I just wanted to put this on everybody's radar. And if you're in Austria, you should be contacting your representatives accordingly. Similarly, Spain is also announcing teen social media restrictions, and this is also inspired by Australia. And they are set to join the other EU nations implementing teen social media bans like Denmark, France, and Portugal, while the UK is also exploring the same. I might add, the UK is exploring a lot more than just age verification. They want to install something that scans everything going through your device on a local level. So it's pretty spooky stuff what the UK is proposing. So the Spain one is set to be approved by the country's Council of Ministers next week, which will amend a draft bill currently being debated. And so there is still time to contact your representatives if you're in Spain. It's not too late. Please contact them. They're trying to roll this stuff out just super quickly. And so we also have to act as quickly as possible as well. So keep an eye out on this, and I'll be sure to send out updates as things keep progressing. Now, it's not just Europe. This is a pretty much non-story, to be honest. Reuters. I have never seen such a short article. If you're watching this on the screen, it's literally 2 sentences. I'm going to read out the entire article. Seriously. Greece is very close to announcing a social media ban for children aged under 15, a senior government source told Reuters on Tuesday. Spain said on Tuesday that it plans to ban social media for those aged under 16 and will create a law to hold social media executives personally responsible for hate speech on their platforms. That, my friends, is the entire Reuters article, and that is all the information I have to share with you. No further analysis needed. So I will give some more broader analysis, though, which is this is really spreading. I did kind of mention this was quite likely to happen in the last month or two. I sadly don't have any new information to share with you guys. I still think it's important that all of us, regardless of what region we're in, we need to be contacting our representatives and telling the politicians what we like about these kind of things and what we don't like, and how we agree that maybe these social media platforms are out of control, but just age verifying people doesn't really solve the root problems here, and it comes with a massive amount of downsides. And so if you're in Greece, if you're in Spain, if you're in France, if you're in Denmark, it doesn't matter where you are. You need to be getting active on your local level, because when you have thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of people who are all fighting this globally, I think there really can be an impact. But we need to give it our best shot. So let's see what we can do here, and I'll keep you guys updated as more develops. Now, before we talk about Microsoft's back away from recall and maybe some wins there, we are going to quickly talk about chat control. There are some updates here that I want to share with all of you. So chat control, again, is this proposition from the EU to backdoor encryption, but has kind of evolved chat control 2.2 to be an age verification type of thing. But now chat control 1.0 is still relevant. It's quite confusing if you ask me, but this is in the context of Chat Control 1.0. This all started because there was a new report about 1.0 and how it could be extended, and it was a proposition from the Commission to encourage other people to essentially vote in favor of this. Now, since then, there have been quite a few updates from Patrick Breyer. The idea here is that they're trying to extend the current implementation of this, which allows EU governments to push to extend warrantless mass scanning by US tech giants. And as Patrick says, extending Chat Control 1.0 is a fatal error. As long as the Commission and Council get their desired mass surveillance approved as a, quote, temporary solution again and again, they feel no pressure to engage with the Parliament's rule of law-based position on the permanent law. And then he says, we are cementing a failed model based on black box AI instead of enforcing modern security standards. So I'm not a European expert here, so I might get some of the details wrong, but my understanding of this, again, feel free to correct any of this in the comments or add more context, is that Chat Control 1.1 has gotten so much pushback that they've essentially implemented this temporary, it's branded as temporary kind of compromised surveillance, where it still does this voluntary scanning via some AI that big tech companies do overall seem to want to implement. And so they can't get anything kind of actually sealed into law. And so what they're doing is they're continuing to just extend this endlessly and just saying, yeah, we don't know what to do, so we're just going to keep it going. And so that is my general understanding of what's going on. And what Patrick is essentially fighting for is saying we need to just end this and find an actual real law here that actually protects children. And he uses a lot of examples of how this privatizes law enforcement and utilizes big tech companies to now try to do law enforcement instead of the government. It also talks about how it's flawed and that lots of these voluntary scanning things actually scan private conversations and have tons of false flags and are a massive invasion of privacy and really just ultimately aren't keeping children safe as designed. Now, since that was put out, there was a new draft report which pretty much says that it's trying to extend the authorization for warrantless chat control, albeit with new restrictions, the most unreliable technologies being a part of them, including scanning text messages and automatically assessing unknown visuals, which are to be excluded. Patrick says while this proposal marks a partial victory for civil society, the Stop Chat Control Alliance warns against celebrating too soon. The draft still permits the warrantless mass scanning of every citizen's private chats for, quote, known material, which he says is hash scanning. He also says the proposed changes would make little difference. Approximately 99% of all chat reports sent to the police came from a single US giant, which is Meta. Meta only searches for known material anyway, a practice they would be permitted to continue under this draft. Consequently, the flood of 48 false positives stems almost entirely from this search, this exact thing that's happening for known material. Patrick once again details the issues here, which doesn't include context and intent blindness on a lot of these things. An image posted thoughtlessly in a group chat or a meme considered funny by teenagers triggers an automatic report of all participants to the police. There's the criminalization of minors. 40% of investigations in Germany target minors, not organized predator rings. So mass hash scanning is the primary driver of this issue, is what Patrick argues. There's also police overload and a failure to protect. His formal statement on this is that both children and adults deserve a paradigm shift in online child protection, not token measures. Whether looking for known or unknown content, the principle remains. The post office cannot simply open and scan every letter at random. Searching only for known images fails to stop ongoing abuse or rescue victims. The consequences are already visible. Police are drowning in false positives that drain valuable resources from the complex hunt for organized predator networks. The EU Parliament must now follow Ms. Sippel's logic to its natural conclusion. If warrantless mass surveillance is wrong for text, it is also wrong for images. Real child protection requires secure apps, proactive cleaning of the public web, and targeted investigations against suspects, not chat control. That's the end of his statement, and I would like to remind everybody that fightchatcontrol.eu, which will be in the show notes, so go check it out, is once again active and made some nice changes, which include now the Chat Control 1.0 extension and different stances that are going to be coming out in the coming days/weeks. And so I will be sure to keep all of you updated as we learn more. But in the meantime, if you're in the EU, it's time to get active again. Continually stay active, continually do what you can, and then try to still have a life outside of it. I think that's the best, healthiest thing that we can do. All right, and now we have a quick story about AI. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but the title is You Won. Microsoft is walking back Windows 11 AI overload, scaling down Copilot, and rethinking recall in a major shift. It's quite funny because as little as like 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had Microsoft baking in Copilot buttons in like its notes editor and in Edge and all these various places. Even the File Explorer. They also teased that Windows would evolve into an agentic OS. My God. And well, we finally have good news. We won, everybody. It appears this moment of pushback has resonated with internal teams. Wow, it only took, 2, 3, 4, 5 years of complaining about these features nonstop for them to finally go, maybe this is a bad idea. But according to people familiar with Microsoft's plans, the company is now reevaluating its AI strategy on Windows 11 and plans changes to streamline or even remove certain AI features where they don't make sense. This may result in Microsoft removing certain Copilot integrations from these apps, or at the very least removing the Copilot branding and pivoting to a more streamlined experience. Windows Recall is another AI experience that I'm told is under review. Sources tell me that Microsoft believes that Recall in its current implementation has failed, though I understand the company is exploring ways to evolve the concept rather than scrap it entirely, possibly dropping the Recall name in the process. The good news is that it's clear Microsoft has heard the feedback around its heavy-handedness when it comes to Copilot buttons in Windows apps. I don't know if that was always true, actually. The company is stepping back to readjust how best to implement these AI integrations across the OS, hopefully resulting in a more meaningful and useful AI experience. So, yes, I think that there are some good things here. I think it's good that Microsoft finally had a breaking point. I didn't know if the breaking point even existed, given how they were handling Copilot and just ignoring literally everybody in the world's feedback about it. But I think this is maybe good. I guess we'll see what happens. Imagine if instead of pouring millions, potentially hundreds of millions, dare I say billions of dollars? I don't know how much investment Microsoft put into their AI stuff, but imagine if Microsoft just put a little bit, like maybe a tenth of that energy into just making Windows a little bit cleaner, more polished, remove the ads, and just to make it a nice alternative to Mac OS that actually might be a decent operating system experience. I know, guys, it's radical. I know I'm going to get comments saying, Henry, that's too radical. You need to, take a chill pill. I understand this is crazy, but I would just love to see what that would look like. What would happen if an operating system was actually designed to be pro-consumer? I don't know. It's hard to know anymore. But no, actually, it's quite interesting, and I think this overall was pretty good for the Linux community. Linux has never had more users, I think partly due to this stuff going on, and so there's some good stuff that happened as a result of Microsoft's misstepping, shall we call it. And I just wanted to share this along as well. This was from PC Mag, and it's actually referencing a DuckDuckGo survey they did. And DuckDuckGo went ahead and asked its users how they feel about AI search. And 90% of them said they don't like it. So you can see the poll if you're watching the video. It's quite simple. Yes AI or no AI. And 90% of DuckDuckGo users selected no AI. If you didn't already know this, DuckDuckGo has already had a no AI subdomain, which is literally noai.duckduckgo.com. And if you access DuckDuckGo via that link, it will not show you anything AI related. And I just think this was quite interesting to show how there's still a lot of resistance to AI. I think there are some decent use cases for AI here and there. But I think it's really important when we see companies actually try to listen to what their users want and not just force features down their throats, which is what everybody else is trying to do. And so I think DuckDuckGo's approach to this is quite good. I think they might want to experiment with AI. They might want to keep up with competition. They might want to provide, because remember, guys, we can't lose the battle here, which is people have expectations from the platforms they use day to day. And so an important part of these privacy tools is making sure they still offer a similar experience to what a typical user would have. And so if someone's using Google every day and they get accustomed to an AI result, it's kind of important, I think, for these privacy respecting alternatives to still offer that kind of feature to those users, because otherwise they're going to go, oh, this DuckDuckGo thing, this start page thing, this Brave search thing doesn't do this thing that I'm using Google for, so I'm just not going to switch to it. So I think there is a middle ground here, and I think DuckDuckGo has found a nice middle ground, which is they have those AI features. They have very clear methods for users to not use those AI features if they don't like them, and they're doing surveys about it and sharing them transparently and trying to give as many kind of toggles as possible. And I think this is my overall stance on this AI thing. So yeah, those are just my thoughts, but I'm curious for yours. So if you're on YouTube, definitely let me know what you think about this kind of thing. I think it's kind of a balancing act, but whatever you guys think, let me know. All right, and now we are going to get into the Digital Rights Bulletin, which is all of the threats from the last week and then also the updates from the last week. So Notepad users, you definitely need to look into things because there was an infrastructure compromise for Notepad++, which allowed China's state hackers to take control of things and deliver a backdoor version of the app to select targets. This was a custom feature-rich backdoor which has never been seen before, so this is quite sophisticated. Now, in the show notes, I'm leaving 2 links for this story. The first is just the Ars Technica coverage, and the second link in the Defense Bulletin is the actual way to dive into whether or not you were impacted by this. And so if you use Notepad++ and you want to be completely confident that you were not impacted, the Rapid7 blog actually deep dives into how to figure that out for yourself. So I'll leave all of that down in the show notes. Okay, the app Chat and Ask AI had a massive leak, which leaked people's private conversations. And so, if you are a user of this app, definitely investigate in the show notes. This is from 404, and they did really nice coverage for it. Panera Bread had a breach which impacted 5.1 million accounts, but not 14 million customers. If you are a Panera Bread person, definitely look into this to see what was impacted. And I will just say that one person in our Signal group mentioned that they actually were part of this data breach, even though they no longer had a Panera Bread account. So some weird stuff going on there. So even if you think that you deleted your Panera account, still look into this because there could be some fishy stuff going on there. Okay, hackers have published personal information stolen during the Harvard and UPenn data breaches. This is quite simple. They published the stolen data because the university refused to pay the ransom. Yeah, the university said it's analyzing the data and will notify any individuals if required by applicable privacy regulations. And Harvard did not even respond. So quite interesting situation. Not, I guess, any kind of real actionable update yet. But of course, as always, I recommend everybody freeze their credit. It's just a general preventative measure against data breaches. Betterment, we finally have some updates. I covered this a few weeks ago, but Betterment is a financial management kind of ecosystem, and hackers stole email addresses and other information from 1.4 million accounts after breaching the systems of automated investment platform Betterment. Betterment still, to this moment, doesn't actually want to comply and make things easy for people, and they have not disclosed the total number of affected individuals. Now, it was Have I Been Pwned who analyzed the stolen data and said it was 1.4 million. So once again, Betterment is not really doing what they should be doing, which is being transparent and being active about this. Luckily, no accounts should have been compromised in the breach. Okay, Substack has confirmed a data breach which affects users' email addresses and phone numbers. There is quite literally no information on how many users were impacted. They said they didn't have any evidence of the data being misused, but I don't know how that's possible. I don't know how they can confirm that. So quite vague. I don't know why these companies think that this is a legitimate way to notify their users of an issue. So I do wish there was a little bit more regulation perhaps on what's required to have to notify users about when there is a data breach, because I think that there should be a bare minimum amount of information that people should know when these things happen. The photo sharing platform Flickr is notifying users of a potential data breach after a vulnerability at a third-party email service provider exposed their real names, email addresses, IP address, and account activity. So if you use Flickr, definitely check out the show notes. One of Europe's largest universities was knocked offline for days after a cyber attack. And this is La Sapienza. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but it's in Rome and it's one of the largest universities. And it's been down for 3 days following a ransomware attack. That's pretty much the main story for now, and so I will be sure to update once things happen, which I'm sure we'll get more information about this maybe next week or the week after, ideally. Also in Spain, the Ministry of Science has shut down systems after breach claims, and this is a partial shutdown of its IT systems, and so if you tried to access that for any particular reason, that's what was going on, and you can find that information in the show notes if you want to learn more. Okay, this one's quite interesting. And so a researcher has revealed evidence of private Instagram profiles that leak photos. And so I don't even think this is the first time it's happened. I remember this was a thing like 5-10 years ago. But Instagram's private account feature is designed to restrict this information. But the researcher found that in certain cases, private profile content was embedded in publicly accessible server responses. It dives into the technical information, but Meta did quietly fix the issue after the report. And so that should now be fixed. I just want to overall remind everybody that Meta just does not really care about privacy, neither from an ethical perspective nor from a technical perspective. They make tons of mistakes. They're sloppy. They leaked literally everybody's passwords in plain text at one point, which means they just never really cared about these things. There is so little care in that company's culture about keeping its users safe that I just really wouldn't trust any Meta product with anything, to be honest, regarding user safety. This one is not really a real story, but I did just want to share it along. The US is actually investigating claims that WhatsApp chats aren't private. That is the core update here, is that they are investigating this. They want to see if it's real. They want to see if Meta actually does implement encryption in the way that they promise, which is to protect user messages by default, unless someone reports messages in the chat. In that case, they do get sent to Meta in plain text, essentially. But yeah, it's quite fascinating. I did do a deep dive dive on whether or not I think WhatsApp has end-to-end encryption and where they do fall short. And so if you want to watch that deep dive, I'll leave a link down in the show notes as well. All right, and now we're going to get into the service updates. This first one is quite fascinating. If you use Brave browser on an iOS device, I actually stumbled on this myself organically. I realized that background playback broke in YouTube. This was an actual thing that YouTube purposefully tried to kill. And so Brave pushed out a new update which fixed the broken background playback feature. So this is just kind of a heads up to people that this is an ongoing fight now, and it seems like maybe YouTube is starting to take notice of things like Brave browser and the kind of benefits that it provides to the YouTube experience. And so just a heads up there, and something that I'm sure will continue unfolding. The cellular provider Cape, which is a privacy-focused cellular provider, and actually I just did an interview with someone from their team a few days ago. I've received so many requests to interview them at this point, and that was done, and it should go live on Techlore Talks in the coming weeks. But they did announce that they are now keeping only 24-hour logs for call logs. So if you call someone, that is deleted from their systems in 24 hours, which is pretty impressive. And this was coverage from 404 Media. There was a quick technical post on Proton's blog, and it was technical. It wasn't marketing, and it was pretty solid. So pretty much they talk about how it's been feeling a little bit scattered, and each platform has its own stuff that's going on. It's hard to maintain across all the different ecosystems, and so they pretty much talk about the new tech stack that they're going to use across all of their different applications across different operating systems. And they are going to be using a Rust core. And if you're watching the video, you can see the way that they kind of break this down. So it's a mix of a Rust core and then some native elements outside of that. And so if you want to learn more and you're more technical, then check out the show notes. I thought this was quite fascinating to read about because they don't normally deep dive how the service works behind the scenes. I thought it was quite fascinating. All right, Tails 7.4.1, the operating system, has an update. And this was an emergency release to fix a critical security vulnerability in OpenSSL. There were some other little changes as well, but definitely get yourself updated if you're a Tails user. Very quick update from Molvad. They have released new currencies so that you can pay in your native currency, which includes UAE dirham, Mexican pesos, and Turkish lira. And again, I apologize if I mispronounced anything there. Mozilla has added AI controls, which is coming to Firefox. So I know Mozilla got a lot of pushback for rolling out some AI features, and so they are adding some AI controls to make this a little bit easier to manage AI preferences. And it looks pretty clean and it looks well thought out to me. So I hope that this is a solid middle ground for people who either want or don't want AI features in their browser. Kaji has brought its translation service to iOS and Android with context-aware image translations, so that's another update for that provider. Vivaldi 7.8 brings pinned tabs, privacy dashboard, and a gesture upgrade to iOS and Android, so Vivaldi users on mobile, definitely check this out. Tor project has released RD 2.0 with major improvements to relay and directory authority. This is essentially Rust Tor, and so they now have Rust Tor 2.0 with a lot of updates. So if you are a Rust nerd, go check this out. I'm sure it's pretty fascinating. LibreOffice has released version 26.2 with Markdown import-export, better Excel compatibility, and a nice speed boost, which is quite fun. Calibre 9.2.1 has introduced mustache templating and key security fixes. The open source video editor Shotcut 26.1 has finally introduced hardware video encoding, and so if you want to get probably much better performance, I'd imagine, on Shotcut, then you can finally do that now on Linux. And it's actually enabled by default for NVIDIA. So this is pretty exciting stuff. And hopefully that might bridge the gap a little bit between something like Shotcut and DaVinci Resolve. Linux Lite 7.8 has released 12 rewritten apps and expands their software selection. And that, my friends, concludes this week's Techlore Surveillance Report. If this analysis helped you reclaim control, please consider becoming a Techlorian by visiting the link in the show notes. In fact, a couple of these stories this week were pretty much given to me or had additional context from people in that Signal group. So thank you all in that Signal group, and also thank you all for supporting Techlore and keeping this content growing and hopefully getting better each week. Make sure to check out the show notes down in the description as well if you want to learn more about any of these stories in particular. And also, if you can, take a moment to leave a rating, share the episode to spread digital freedom. And I want to thank you all for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of Surveillance Report. Thank you for watching or listening.